What is up, guys? My name is Matt from Magic the Greatening, and today I got the deck you guys voted for last time. It's going to be Simic Merfolk Tribal. It's actually not just completely green and blue. We are splashing a single black card in the main deck, and it's the only actually black card in the entire, 75 cards, including Sideboard. So, before we get into it, go ahead, hit that like button, helps out a lot. Subscribe if you are new, and click the eye icon. Top right corner, we got three choices this time. I believe you guys are probably going to choose vampires, but we'll see. Three choices up there for you. Go ahead and vote. Now let's get into it. Alright, let's get into the creatures. And we're not playing any 1-drops. Let's just start with the 2-drops. We're going to be playing 4 copies of Metallic Mimic, 4 copies of Winding Constrictor, 3 copies of Merfolk Branchwalker, and 4 copies of Deeproot Champion. That's a lot of 2-drops. Yes, and you figured out what the black card is. Winding Constrictor. It goes really well in this deck. Like, really, really well. We have a lot of, +1/+1 counter synergies. And Winding Constrictor just makes them strictly better. We have a card that makes all our guys with +1 counters unblockable. This will buff up those dudes with the +1/+1 counters. It gets insane. So that's Winding Constrictor. You guys know how good this is. There's an entire deck just built around this that's still kind of in the meta here. Metallic Mimic also gives counters to guys, which is very convenient. Sort of like our Merfolk Lord. He's going to be played in mostly every single tribal deck, except probably dinosaurs. 3 Merfolk Branchwalker. This card surprised me how good this is. I was skeptical about Explorer, the mechanic Explorer, excuse me. But it's really good, especially on bodies that are just unconditionally 2-mana 2/1s. So Explorer is like you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you draw it. If it's not a land, you either can keep it on top of your library, put it in your graveyard, and then put the counter on the creature that's exploring. So if you explore, there's a land, great, you just drew an extra card off a 2-drop. If it's not a land, you're like, okay, I don't need this right now, or I need this right now. I'm going to keep this on top or put it in my library, and then your 2-drop's now a 3/2. It's just super, super strong, and it's got the +1 counter synergy going with it, so there was no reason not to play this card. And then Deeproot Champion is kind of the reason I went a little bit lower on the creatures. We're only playing 23 creatures, which is a little low for a tribal deck, but for good reason, because this says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Deeproot Champion. With Winding Constrictor out, that's super strong, and we have a lot of spells that are just basically built to protect our creatures and keep them on board so they don't just get removed the moment they come out. So Deeproot Champion goes really well with those spells. We'll get into that later in the video. But yeah, those are our 2-drops. Before we get into the 3 and 4 drops, I want to explain why we're not playing Kumena Speaker, which is a 1-mana. It's a green mana for a 1/1 Merfolk Shaman. It says it gets +1/+1 as long as you control another Merfolk or an island. A lot of people are playing this in theirs, and I'm sure some of you will ask about it, like you guys always do. So the reason I'm not playing it here is like every single reason I give for my tribal decks. There's just no room. Every other card we're playing in this deck is strictly better. It just is. Having a 1-mana 2/2 is great, but I would rather play Winding. Winding Constrictor took its place, and Winding Constrictor is better in this deck, even though it's not a Merfolk. So that's the reason I figured I should probably explain it in the video. Let's move on. We're moving on. 3-mana, 4-mana, and even 5-mana creatures here. We're going to be playing 3 copies of Kapala, Warden of Waves, 3 copies of Herald of the Secret Streams, and 2 copies of Verdurous Gearhulk. Yeah, we're playing Verdurous Gearhulk in here. We got a +1/+1, counter theme, and if there's no Merfolk out, you got wiped or something. This is just a 5-mana 8/8. That's just super strong. Or if you have a whole bunch of Merfolk out, and you have a Winding Constrictor out, you just put a huge amount of counters on your guys, and they just start going ham. So there's another reason to play Verdurous Gearhulk. For Kapala, Warden of Waves is our actual Merfolk Lord. It's not Metallic Mimic, which is a Lord in every tribal deck. For 3 mana, you get a legendary 2/2 that says, spells your opponents cast that target a Merfolk you control cost 2 more to cast. Same thing for activated abilities. So this basically means like Lightning Strikes cost 4 mana, which is terrible. Shocks cost 3 mana, which is terrible. All your opponent's removal literally becomes terrible when this card's out. And then for activated abilities, probably the best example I can give with that is the Dynavolt Tower. I actually need to explain that they don't need to pay 7 energy to tap and deal 3 damage to one of your creatures. They need to tap, pay 5 energy, and 2 mana. I wanted to clear that up because, I don't know, I felt like I should. Just an overall really strong Lord. I mean, it doesn't buff up our guys. It doesn't make it, it's not like it gives our other Merfolk +1/+1 in Island Walk for 2 mana. But it makes our Merfolk really hard to take out. And that's hard for control decks to deal with. So, Kapala is good for that. And then Herald of Secret Streams is the reason we're playing kind of a +1/+1 counter theme. Yeah, we can make all our Merfolk like super, super big and hard to kill. But this will make them unblockable, and that is so, so strong, even if it's a 4-mana 2/3. There's no reason not to play this. It's the reason I kind of added black into the deck and Winding Constrictor is now I wanted to add all these counters to my guys, make them super big and unblockable, and just one turn win the game. So yeah, 3 copies of this. All right, before we move to the non-creature spells, here's another card that was considered for the deck, and that's Tempest Caller, which is actually a really strong card. And if you believe it or not enough room in here in this deck for it. So it's a 4-mana 2/3, but it's like 2 and 2 blue. But it says when this enters, tap all creatures your opponent controls. It's also a Merfolk, so you'd think it would probably be in the Merfolk deck, right? I mean, if you don't have the money for Verdurous Gearhulk or Metallic Mimic, although I really, really recommend Metallic Mimic in this deck, it's actually more important that you have this Metallic Mimic in this deck than any other tribal deck in Standard right now. But if you want to take out Verdurous Gearhulk, or maybe you don't want to splash black for Winding Constrictor and run 3 colors and have to worry about that, you could throw in Tempest Caller. Which I guess is good. I mean, it makes the deck a little bit worse. Doubling your counters on your Merfolk is super, super strong. It's really, really strong. But if you don't want to do it, you want to play Tempest Caller instead, I'm not stopping you. Let's move to the non-creature spells. Alright, just like I said before, most of our non-creature spells, and actually more than half of them, are here just to make sure our creatures don't die. Yes, Kapala can make it not impossible, but more difficult for our opponent to kill our Merfolk. But we want to make sure that none of our Merfolk die the entire game, which obviously is impossible to ask for. But we're pretty close to it. So we're going to be playing 4 copies of Blossoming Defense, 4 copies of Dive Down, 3 copies of Deep Root Waters, and 3 copies of Sixth Sense. Yeah. Blossoming Defense plus Dive. That's 8 cards that gives one of our things hexproof. Blossoming Defense is also a pump spell if that's relevant for you trying to get lethal. Dive Down can give one of your guys like a buff. So if you like double block or something, or you attack and they double block you, and so if your guy isn't unblockable, and then they like try to remove it or something, and then you can hexproof, give it +3. It lives through combat. Super good combat trick, along with Blossoming Defense. I wanted to play all those. Not only is it good with protecting our stuff, but it's also good with things like Deep Root Champion, which unconditionally is a 2-mana 1/1. But if you could play it on turn 3 and leave up like a Blossoming Defense or a Dive Down, you play it, they try to remove it, you Dive Down or Blossoming Defense, it gets a counter, and it has hexproof. So it's just a good deal all around. We want to be able to protect our stuff as much as we can, and that's why we're playing 8 of those. As for Deep Root Waters, it's a 3-mana enchantment that says whenever you cast a Merfolk spell, create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token with hexproof. I realize we're not playing all Merfolk. Verdurous Gearhulk and Winding Constrictor are not Merfolk. But the rest is, and I mean 17 Merfolk is still a large amount. Even if you only get 1 or 2 or 3 tokens off this, it's still really good. A 1/1 hexproof is good. Metallic Mimic can buff those up and make them 2/2s. However, I need to point this out. If you have Deep Root Waters out and you cast Metallic Mimic, this triggered ability from Deep Root Waters does not go off, because Metallic Mimic is an enter the battlefield effect when you choose what creature type it is. So you won't get the Merfolk token from that, but from anything else, you will. It was a worthy 3 of in the deck. And then for Sixth Sense, we have a lot of unblockable stuff. our stuff usually isn't going to die. So if we can have something unblockable or ridiculously large, you could throw a 6 cents on it and start drawing cards. Feels like a good deal. If you feel uncomfortable with playing 6 cents, for me, 6 cents did well in the deck. Even if it draws you one card, it does really good. Even if it draws you one card, it's like done its value. There's games where this has drawn me 2 or 3 cards, and that's where it really, really shines. So 6 cents felt right. If you don't want to play it and you want to run like a counter spell or like unsummon or something like that, go ahead, feel fine. Or Fatal Push. It's all up to you. But this is more of a friendly budget version, even though this deck's still like $120. But 6 cents is in there to help us draw us cards. Before we get into the lands, let me tell you how to budget-ize this deck. If you take out 2 Verdurous Gearhulk, 1 Metallic Mimic, and all these expensive dual lands I'm about to show you and replace them with like Evolving Wilds or something, you can get the price of this deck to go from like $120, which is from pre-order sales, so it's a little bit higher than probably what it'll be in a few weeks. And you can get that from $120 down to about $50, which is a lot more reasonable. Obviously, if you can keep the Metallic Mimic, that's probably the card I want you to keep the most in the deck, because it's a huge part of our game plan, and that's why I'm recommending only taking 1 out. And then you could replace that with like counter spells or unsummon or something like that, or any other merfolk like Tempest Caller. Yeah, Tempest Caller. So anyway, that's how you budgetize the deck. Again, I'll leave that stuff in the description like I always do. Let's get into the lands now. We're playing 4 Blooming Marsh, 4 Botanical Sanctum, 4 Drowned Catacomb, 5 Forest, and 6 Islands. You notice we're not playing any swamps, and all our black sources are coming from dual lands. Obviously, if you're trying to budgetize this deck, you can't just not play a swamp. You're going to have to play the same amount of swamps, because you do need to hit a Winding Constrictor. That's really important in the deck. But yeah, Blooming Marsh and Drowned Catacomb are black sources in the deck, which is there's 8 black sources, and if you don't hit one of these lands, you can't cast Winding Constrictor, which is a bummer. I guess you could probably take out 1 island and put in, or take out an island and a forest and put in the swamp and an Evolving Wilds or something like that. Or, you know, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. I felt like 8 black sources was enough. We're playing 1 entire black. There's 1 devotion of black in this entire deck. It comes from Winding Constrictor. I didn't really have problems with it at all. So there's that. Let's move to the sideboard. Alright, sideboard time is mostly hate cards against decks we're weak against. 3 Cook Condemnation because we hate graveyard stuff. 4 Essence Scatter against mid-range decks that can rush us to beat with the beatdowns, I guess. I don't know, that sounded weird. 4 Negate against Control. I know we're already playing things like Dive Down and Blossoming Defense, but Planeswalkers are still a problem for us. Planeswalkers are pretty terrible. And then 4 Unsummon. Actually, Unsummons are better than they appear. They're good, really, against mid-range decks, but they're also good at protecting your own guys. So if you're playing against a mid-range deck, you could probably take out like Dive Downs and replace them with Unsummons, because Unsummon can save one of your guys. Obviously, it removes the +1 counters of them, but it overall saves them. And it can also bounce their creatures back to their hands. So, yeah, that's our sideboard. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. This deck took a little bit of work. Originally, it was Simic. I threw in Winding Constrictor, and the deck turned out really, really good. I know a lot of people probably won't like 6th Sense, but I really like that card. Draws you a lot of cards. Our guys are already mostly unblockable, and they're going to get ridiculously huge. So, there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.